Hello, this is Saved by Grace, Not Works. And today I want to talk about 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 5, which reads, "The Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. They forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods, which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know the truth. For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer." So in the past, this is where I thought that Paul was teaching against the dietary instructions in Leviticus chapter 11. Because verse 4 says, "For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving." But if you keep reading, that thought doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because it says, "It is consecrated by the word of God and prayer." So the word consecrated there means set apart. Where in the Bible do we know where it says what God set apart for us to eat? What animals did God say we can eat and set apart not to eat? He set apart the animals for us to eat. And we know that we find those instructions in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. If you take 1 Timothy to say that everything is set apart, then you really end up with nothing set apart. You no longer have anything set apart by the word of God. It would nullify the word consecrated there in verse 5. So now let's look at how Paul describes the people who are forbidding marriage and teaching to abstain from certain foods. He says that they've abandoned the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. He also calls them hypocritical liars. So we have to ask ourselves some questions. Would following God's instructions mean you're abandoning the faith? Not necessarily. As long as you place your faith in Jesus' sacrifice to save you and then follow God's instructions out of love, you're not abandoning faith. You're just being a citizen of God's kingdom who respects that God's laws are what Paul calls in Romans chapter 7, verse 12, holy, righteous, and good. Another question: were the instructions of God given through deceiving spirits or demons? No, absolutely not. Was Moses a hypocritical liar? While Moses was far from perfect, I don't believe when he passed on the laws God gave him that he was being a hypocritical liar. So, who are these people then that Paul is talking about? Most likely he's referring to the Gnostics and the ascetics. And they thought the flesh was so bad that you shouldn't give into any indulgence of it. That would be taking part in the feast of the Lord, which the ascetics thought was gluttonous, as well as resting on the Sabbath, which they considered that slothfulness. They considered even marriage to be giving into the flesh. They thought by treating the body harshly, the Gnostics thought and taught that if you could treat the body harshly, then you would learn hidden spiritual truths. But we know what God has created to be received with thanksgiving and set apart by the word of God and prayer. And we find that in Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. So these are just some thoughts to think about. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. This is Saved by Grace, Not Works, and I'll see you next time.